And it's time for another week of Anderson Medicine, a behind-the-scenes look at medicine. And this week, I have been looking forward, since we started doing this, to this week with these two folks. We have two senior residents from the Jewish Hospital Internal Medicine Program. If you don't know what that is, hang on, you'll find out. First, I want to just introduce Dr. Chris Riffle, who's the chief resident, third-year resident, and Dr. Caitlin Royer, who's also the third-year resident, who happened to work with me in clinic. I want to give kind of a background about medical education. And so for years, I served on the admissions committee at Wright State University, and admissions committee there and throughout the country have two questions that they have to answer. The first is, can this person be a doctor? There are certain technical and intellectual skills you have to have, and then more importantly, should this person be a doctor? And both of these folks clearly, I think, meet that criteria. Medical schools hold a real significant responsibility because that is the entryway into the possibility of, can you become a physician? Medical school's 4 years. In the fourth year, there is something called the match. And so when you graduate from the fourth year of medical school, yeah, you're an MD and they call you doctor, but you can't do anything. You have to do what's called a residency or graduate medical education. Both Dr. Royer and Dr. Riffle are third-year internal medicine residents at the Jewish Hospital. Jewish Hospital is one of the oldest internal medicine residency programs in the country. In fact, maybe the oldest in Cincinnati. You probably remember Jewish Hospital on Burnett Avenue. They were there for 147 years, moved in 1997 to Kenwood, where the program is today. And so I just want to introduce you guys, and then I want to talk about your pathways. Dr. Riffle, both of you actually did things before you went to medical school. And so you have a degree in biomedical engineering from Case Western University, a biology degree from Kansas State. You have done a ton of jobs. I just have a couple of them. You were home health hospice, a teaching assistant, phlebotomist, a marketing manager for UPS, an office manager, a lifeguard, and then you went to medical school. So I'm interviewing you for medical school. Why did you want to be a doctor?
Yeah, so I've tried out a lot of career paths, and the first one I tried obviously was along the way trying to make money to get through college, which, as we all know nowadays, is different than when you went through college. So I was trying to fund
a long time ago, right? Yeah.
I mean, what, five years ago or so. So since then, cost of college has skyrocketed. So to pay my way through college, that's why I had this variety of jobs. And getting out of college, you know, my father's a physician, so he let me know the medical world has changed. Don't go into medicine. I said, yeah, that's right. I'm not going to go into medicine. I did everything to stay out of it and ended up falling into, from my UPS job, where I was recruiting old lost accounts with UPS, like pirates. I learned pirates exist, real modern pirates. Our insurance company was not filling claims because, you know, it doesn't cover piracy, and UPS does a lot of freight. So I was recovering these lost accounts for UPS. I met one of my accounts at University of Colorado Hospital, gained it back, and with that relationship, I ended up going and getting a job in support services because of my biomedical engineering degree, designed plasmapheresis equipment there, and worked on my own second shift. It turned out I had some skill in Excel and got my boss's job, who was support services director. I did the budget for 237 housekeeping employees, maintenance employees, and so I was this 24-year-old manager of, you know, a bunch of men in their mid-50s, some women in their mid-50s. So I did that for 7 years. And while I was giving a presentation on C. diff eradication to my housekeeping staff about using a 10-to-1 bleach solution to clean the SICU, because 9 out of 10 of our patients that came out of there came out with C. diff. We eradicated C. diff, and these ENT residents said, you know what, maybe you should go to med school, because that was like a grand round you just gave to a bunch of housekeeping staff. So they signed some letters of rec, a radiologist signed a letter of recommendation, and after finding out that the amount of time I'd been out of school was kind of a negative for a lot of medical schools because I didn't have a graduate degree, I ended up going to a Caribbean medical school called Ross University. And you know, I went through in 3.5 years and got a lot of travel in, so it was nice. So I know how to manage people. I know what the other side of the hospital does, most importantly, like support services. I was a phlebotomist, as you know, so yeah, I think all that life experience taught me that as hard as doctors work, there's people out there that work harder than doctors, and no one ever says thank you. I mean, I don't know, the first time I actually had a thank you was when we were on the news after a sewer pipe exploded at University of Colorado Hospital. Somebody said thank you for making sure that some of our medical files didn't get raw sewage on them. So yeah, that was 7 years of employment. But as a doctor, you hear it, you know, at least twice a week.
And you're probably the most thankful. We were just laughing that you probably get the most gifts from patients of anybody
Oh
in the
yeah,
whole residency
you know,
program.
yeah, the scotch. It's all under $50. I just want to point that out. There's laws.
Yeah.
For
Okay.
the gift
So
shop.
Dr. Royer, in the middle, you two have a pretty interesting background. She has a degree in history and in music, and the jazz saxophonist from the University of Washington. She studied in France in 1999. In 2000, she lived and worked in Bulgaria as an academic advisor for students who wanted to study in the U.S.
Yeah.
You taught personal essay writing classes.
Yeah.
From 2002 to 2006, you worked at UC Berkeley Bioscience Library and took your pre-science classes. And you, too, went to Ross University at exactly the same time as Dr. Riffle, and you did not know each other. And
did
here you
not.
are at Jewish Hospital.
Didn't know
each
So
other.
welcome. Why did you want to be
you.
a doctor?
I had always thought about it when I was young and went into a lot of other fields that I thought were fun, probably because I didn't have the maturity and patience to study the science classes that other people, you know, had time to do. And when I was in graduate school in a history program at UCLA, and I began to feel like it was really irrelevant. Not that it wasn't interesting, and I have a lot of respect for historians, but I was going to spend the rest of my life in a little dark cave looking at archives and working really hard to publish a book that other people just criticize, and I realized the whole world was arguments between historians, and I really wanted something where it had an impact on people in the world and where I could interact with people and meet a lot of different people instead of being in a little cave. And since I'd already been interested in medicine before, I started slowly taking the prerequisites while working, and
Well, great.
it turned out to
So-
be a good decision.
So I know that apparently residents are going to watch this, so I don't want to compliment you guys too much, but I do have the privilege of working with you in clinic, and you both are excellent clinicians. You have a feel for what people want. And so as you finish your residency and you looked at what you're going to do, you, Dr. Riffle, are going into primary care.
Yes.
Much needed. In fact, one of the first internal medicine graduates in about 3 years to do that. You, Dr. Royer, are going into hospital medicine and focusing on the hospital. One of about a million, a bunch of the residents
Yeah.
who have done that.
Yeah.
And so I'd start with you, Chris, what kind of pushed you toward the primary care and what are you going to do?
Well, me, I look at things when I was trying to go through residency as kind of a process of elimination, because that's kind of how I've gone through life. You saw on my resume, I've gone through quite a number of jobs. So process of elimination, I've gone through every aspect of medicine. I've rotated through every single subspecialty fellowship that's a subdivision of internal medicine. So I figured out in med school where I wanted to go, and then it was just a process of elimination. Where do I want to not go? And I figured out where I didn't want to go. And one thing that I found out as a weakness in the healthcare system in general is a real lack of continuity for some people. And there needs to be a physician that helps with that continuity. Now, part of that is coordination of care, which, not to sound arrogant, but it's a little below a doctor's pay grade a lot of times. But some doctor has to know other doctors. He has to say, oh, I know who to call. You got a heart problem? I know who to call, and I know when to call them. And I think the art of medicine is knowing what you don't know. And one thing I've learned in residency is what I don't know. And what I don't know is a lot of these subspecialties. And so I need to know when to call them. And I do know that.
Mm-hmm.
So I know when to call for help. And I think there needs to be a doctor that does that, knows when to call for help. And but you don't need to go straight, as a patient, you don't need to go straight to those specialists. So come to me, I'll triage you, in essence, without doing it in an emergency setting, and I'll take care of your ongoing health problems, but then know who to send you to when things go downhill, or, just for screening. In residency, I learned that our clinic, you work there, we take care of a different patient population. We take care of people who are really in need. They don't have any money. They can't afford health care. So we have to come up with tricks, gimmicks to get around a lot of that. And I realized that there's a lot of people out there that need health care. They don't need to see these specialists. They just need somebody to keep an eye on them and make sure that they're going down the right track in life. So, it's like a professional life coach that has a prescription pad. So I learned that there's a big gap, and primary care needs more doctors. And that's real traditional internal medicine, and I think it's changed. And my dad is right. He knew a totally different world. But our new generation of doctors doesn't know that old world. We can step into it bright-eyed, ready to go, and we don't know what it used to be like. We don't know the glory days.
Yeah.
So
and your generation and the just recent generation, are not going to know the sort of financial, riches.
That's right.
In fact, struggle even to pay off kind of school loans.
We do struggle with that.
Definitely.
And so I don't think people realize that the physicians getting out of residency, in many cases, are not even able to buy a house for a number of years.
Because we already own a house. It's just,
it's
it
our
doesn't
education.
physically exist. It's just,
Yeah.
it's an education that costs the same as a very nice house.
Yeah.
So Caitlin, you're also, we talk about this a lot in clinic, philosophy of medicine, and both of you are very good. You have your own kind of special patient following, I think, that you work with, but you are going to focus on hospital medicine, and
Right.
And actually you're going to be at Mercy Hospital Anderson.
Yes.
So why? What's appealing about that?
I had a couple of different thought processes. One was the intellectual stimulation of choosing to take care of a higher acuity patient. So for me, the sicker somebody is, the more I get out of taking care of them, the more they get out of me taking care of them. And I think there's also a need for people who don't get stressed out in really dangerous situations where a patient is really critical or really unstable. And that's a situation that I enjoy and I feel pretty comfortable in. And I also feel pretty comfortable talking to patients about end-of-life issues and things that a lot of people find awkward. So there's that reason. Throughout residency, my main interest has been critical care medicine. Part of the reason that I did not choose to go into critical care medicine was my other thought process, which was that I did do a lot of things before medical school. I'm older than a lot of residents finishing, and at some point you have to stop and realize you can't just continue to train for your whole life. So hospital medicine is a good medium between having the broad range of medical problems that you take care of, and it's intellectually stimulating and rewarding, but it's also a good way to make a living and a pretty decent lifestyle once you start working. So
what's interesting is that both of you have been involved in research related to end of life. In fact,
Together.
presented at the national conference. What was the research?
I'll start that.
Sure,
So,
go ahead.
So both of us, starting in our intern year, became interested in code status discussions after many difficult situations that we had dealt with in our intensive care unit. So we began to look at what type of additional information would affect patients' decisions on end-of-life care, such as CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, and intubation. So what we looked at in the first randomized controlled trial that we did was we had a control group of people who got regular care, whatever discussion they may have with the doctor who admitted them to the hospital. And this second group was a group of patients that got a script. We read them a script with information on CPR and intubation, and they also got to watch an educational video that was, 2.5 minutes, something like that.
Yeah, about 2.5 minutes.
And we found that About 30% of patients with the additional information chose to be DNR, no CPR, no intubation, and about 8% of the regular group did. So that was statistically significant in that it really did affect people's decisions. And I don't know if you want to talk about the second one.
Oh yeah, the second one. So just to preempt this, we didn't really address this, but there's actually an ongoing national nonprofit, the Conversation Project. And so this is really just kind of an adjunct to that because we're doing inpatient, and it's really people that have been triaged to hospital rooms rather than nursing homes and outpatient, which is more the Conversation Project. And so the second randomized trial, we actually wanted to see if the video that we were showing patients made a difference at all. So then we randomized these two groups again to just having a script where we verbally discussed end-of-life issues, described CPR, described mechanical ventilation, and what happens when you go through the process of dying. And then we also showed a video to another group along with the script. And we were trying to see if there was any statistical difference between someone seeing a video, not an actual video, unfortunately. That's not a video you can show of someone dying, but it was us performing CPR. And we found that there actually wasn't a statistical significance to showing a video. So just explaining and talking to somebody about their end of life would in itself possibly influence their decisions on end-of-life care.
Yeah.
And they don't need to see a video. They don't need any adjunct. They just need someone to talk to them. So,
Imagine that.
yeah, imagine that, just talking.
Yeah.
That's what
Just
I'm going into.
communicating with your patients, even in the hospital, and
That's right.
especially
Turns
in
out
the hospital.
communication's pretty important.
Yes.
So,
If you're just joining us, this is Anderson Medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Steve Fagans, and we're talking today with Jewish Hospital Internal Medicine Chief Resident Dr. Chris Riffle, third-year resident, and Senior Resident Dr. Caitlin Royer, both in clinic with me. Dr. Riffle in primary care, interestingly, your description of primary care is the doc who knows everybody.
that's right.
But yet you practice in a setting where you may not even talk to other docs.
Yeah, it can be kind of isolated. I think what's important is the residency itself. And so we work with a lot of subspecialists, and in fact, in the second and third years of residency, that's primarily what you do is you get out of the hospital, you work with doctors who work in these subspecialties. So you really have to do a lot of meeting and greeting, and it's important to be social and be sociable because you're pretty isolated, and you can be. That's why I chose to go into a traditional medical practice, and so I'm actually going to see my own patients when they get admitted to the hospital. That is probably the rarest of rare nowadays. Thankfully, I'm joining a group where I have a mentor who's about 10 years older than me and has established the practice with another gentleman who's 8 years older than him, who was his mentor. So we almost have this generation of doctors who are going to be working together, and eventually in the next few years I'll probably take over the senior mentor's position, but there's still a need for doctors in the side of town where I went, as you and I both know.
Yeah.
So I think that with them I'm also going to get to know those people that I need to know in that part of town, but really it's not necessarily knowing the people, which is very important, but knowing when to call and the appropriateness of the referral. I mean, we have a great referral system already, is I think really one of the important parts and roles that an outpatient primary care doctor can play. And then when do you need to go to the hospital and when do you need to come see me in the clinic? Because patients get scared and they need somebody to call, and they need somebody who's going to be on call and who has a well set up call system, but can also have a lifestyle that consists of, in my case, a 9-to-5 job where I can still teach half a day a week at the Jewish resident clinic and then be on call once every 8 weeks to see my patients in the hospital and split that up with a couple other partners and nurse practitioners. So, yeah.
So Caitlin, in the hospital, you interact with a ton of docs all day.
Yeah.
People may not know that at Mercy Anderson we have a free clinic. It's called Mercy Care Clinic. It's kind of my clinic, but lots of physicians. And Caitlin has already agreed to, thank you
Yes.
for agreeing to,
No problem.
to spend some time, with that clinic. Why? I don't want to put you on the spot, but You know,
Well,
thank you for doing it, by the way.
no problem. Just because I've decided to go into hospital medicine doesn't mean that I don't have an interest in taking care of underserved people. If I have a skill that's very helpful to somebody, if they don't have access to it, you know, I really think that everybody should have access to healthcare. And while we're in a time when there are people that don't, I can help with that. It's also a good opportunity for me not to forget the rest of internal medicine. Because, as Dr. Riffle said, outpatient medicine is a large amount of traditional internal medicine, and you don't want to lose your skills. So there's a lot of good reasons for that.
Do you feel prepared? You know, you're finishing your residency. I'll just precept and say, I didn't, my wife didn't. No doctor I know really felt prepared at the end of. It's like, you know, you're now driving the car without, you know, somebody with you. I mean, but how prepared do you feel now that you're like approaching that time?
For inpatient hospitalist type patients, I feel like we've had a pretty good preparation. Our program is heavily hospital-based for its training, and undoubtedly I can think of a lot of things where I would have to look it up or discuss with other people, but I still feel like I'll be pretty comfortable with it, you know, with exceptions. In the outpatient arena, maybe not as comfortable. Still need to study some in that area.
So Chris, you rotated with us in sports medicine.
That's right.
Did that start your kind of interest in, because you really have a big, not just in, you know, the internal medicine part, but like the joints and this, you know, do you feel prepared?
Do I feel prepared? Well, those are two different questions. Now, so definitely with the joints, I think that did move me in a direction where I said, hey, this is something I can do. Not only can I do, I feel comfortable doing it, but it's something that's done. And there's outpatient primary care doctors that should be doing this, especially if they're comfortable with it and they can avoid an initial referral to an orthopedic surgeon that was probably inappropriate. That way I can send them the appropriate stuff and I can take care of the rest. That's okay. Yeah, I mean, in fact, yesterday, I know you weren't in clinic with me. Sorry, I switched days, but you know, I did 4 joint injections completely comfortably under, in 3 cases, you know, indirect supervision. And today, you know, I'm working outpatient with Dr. Barry Brook. I did, 3 more, no problem. But feeling prepared? No, not at all. And that's because, like you pointed out, I'm going to be by myself, essentially. I'm going to be isolated. And the group I'm joining, they're contacting me repeatedly, and it's because they want to know when they can go on vacation. When's the new guy going to come? When can I go on vacation? And there's going to be this scary point. I know it's going to happen. 2-3 weeks in, they're going to say, well, looks like you're settled in. We're going to go on vacation now. And I think at that point, yeah, I'm going to get a little scared, and I'm going to need to know who to call. And I think that there's no way I could ever feel that prepared. And that's why I wanted to go into a group where I have a mentor, where there's a senior physician there who I can say, I'd like to model my practice after you, and please be my Yoda, you know, pass on your primary care knowledge to me. And I hope I'll get enough of that in those first 2 to 3 weeks before he takes his kids on a month-long vacation, before they go back to school, and not harm anybody in that 1 month. But yeah, I mean, I don't think I'll ever feel fully prepared going into it. And is that a bad thing? No, because I think a little bit of fear for a doctor is pretty safe. We need to be scared. If I weren't scared a little bit, I think that's when I could really hurt somebody. The most harm is potentially there when I'm not second guessing myself and I'm not a little scared of what I'm doing, because these are human lives, you know. Even if it's a mole that's getting a little big or a sinus problem, you know, that's still a human life. So yeah.
When I got out of the Air Force and started my own practice, I went around to retiring docs and I asked them, if you were me, if you were starting out, you know, what advice could you give me? And pretty consistently the advice was, don't take it personally. You know, because people can be kind of unpleasant. And we've actually talked about this, you know, people who kind of did it to themselves. You know, many of the patients that we care for and we do the best we can, but you know, you sort of have that mixed emotion of, you know, things that people did to themselves. Yeah. How do you reconcile that? You have a lot.
I do in the outpatient setting, but also in the inpatient setting, and in particular in the intensive care unit, you see this a lot where somebody gets admitted over and over and may be on a ventilator several times, and it's because they never fill their COPD medications, or they come in with DKA because they haven't taken any insulin in 3 or 4 months, and it happens over and over and over. And you have to take care of this person because this person is sick, but it's pretty frustrating that they never, frequently, many patients never do anything to keep themselves out of the hospital when it's something they could do.
Yeah.
So it is pretty frustrating.
How do you deal with that?
Well, I think I'm dealing with that by just my choice of career path, because I'm going to be able to see the patients hopefully before they end up in the ICU on the ventilator, so I can hopefully guide them. But you know, what I tell patients when I see them in clinic is, and you know, there is some statistical data to back this up, is about 17 to 20% is me. I can take care of your health that far, but you're in charge of like 80 to 83% of your health. So I think if you make that kind of an agreement with a patient at the start of your relationship, then you're not setting unrealistic expectations. So just letting them know, most of this is on you. So that's the way healthcare's always worked. I mean, there's no magic pill. So we can't undo 50 years of hard living just by one hospital stay. So I think preventative health care is probably the thing I'll focus most on, and that's what I can do in an outpatient setting. Ironically, Dr. Royer has done a research study on that as well with your vaccines, the outpatient, inpatient, the outpatient clinic, and
With the flu.
and the flu. Yeah, to see how flu vaccine compliance was. So she's she's gone so far as to delve into that. But yeah, preventative health care is something that I'll have to focus on. You know, and you know.
Well, Dr. Chris Riffle, I want to thank you. Dr. Caitlin Royer, I want to thank you. You know, we're talking about things that people do to themselves, and in the news this week, in 2007, drug overdose became the leading cause of injury death in Ohio, surpassing motor vehicle accidents for the first time on record. 3 out of 4 prescription drug overdoses are caused by painkillers, opiates, and half of heroin addicts report getting their first opiate prescription from a doctor. Opiate addiction is a huge deal, and the state legislature is trying to crack down on that. And so April 1st, House Bill 341 requires all doctors to actually look at something called ORS, which is the patient database of prescription information. It's called the Ohio Automated RX Reporting System, to do a report on any scheduled medications, which includes a benzodiazepine like Xanax or Ativan, or an opiate like Vicodin or Percocet. And so we are really in a crisis because we are really kind of motivated not to prescribe these things, but yet people are in pain. What do you do? So next week we have Dr. Ram Atlery, who is a pain specialist. You guys, I think, have rotated with him. He literally wrote the chapter on how to take care of chronic non-cancer pain with low-dose opiates or non-opiates. And so next week on Anderson Medicine, we'll be talking about opiates. Thank you, and take care.